Welcome to Trump Breaking News Network, your daily source for up-to-date news on the political scene of Donald Trump, his presidency, American politics and conspiracies. Please subscribe to receive notice of our daily updates. Also share with your friends and your social media. We encourage you to like our videos and give your comments.
This is TBNN.
Trump to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and plans to move the U.S. Embassy there. If there's one thing that's abundantly clear about the presidency of Donald Trump, it's that from year to year and from president to president, nothing much really changes. The same deep state interests that seem to control the presidency and guide its decisions and actions seem to be doing the same with Trump, especially when it comes to the terror war industry. But who really knows? That being said, how we perceive the president is completely different, and largely shaped by what we see and hear in the mainstream media. The power elite did everything they could to ensure a victory for Clinton, primarily because she has been a long-time puppet of the global elite. Trump was and will continue to be demonized by mainstream media, and his character makes it easy. America's ruling elite's ideology for decades, neoliberalism and neoconservatism, seemed to be in jeopardy when Donald Trump was elected, but again, nothing much has changed and he is making the exact same moves as any other president would have been ordered to do. This is important to mention, because when talking about the presidency, the deep state institutions and the men in dark suits to which Vladimir Putin referred to, are never really mentioned. This is where the conversation needs to go. Are presidents simply making moves for their masters? Are they simply the fall person? It sure seems that way. And no student of history can really deny the existence of the secret government. Whether it's a person like Senator Daniel K. Inouye telling us that there exists a shadowy government with its own air force, its own navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself, or a Theodore Roosevelt type of figure, who told the world that behind the ostensible government sits enthroned an invisible government owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people. The black budget world is another great example. So, again, when we are pondering over moves made by the presidency, it's important to realize that they are probably not his decisions, and he is simply following the orders of his masters. There are multiple dozens of those from within the political realm who have said such things. To see a few more quotes, you can refer to this article. Today, Donald Trump is set to order the State Department to start moving the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. This was a campaign promise made by Trump, and it's one that could heighten tensions across the Middle East. Heightening tensions and creating conflict, separation has been a tool of the global elite for years. This has come to light even more with the transparency of false flag terrorism, and 9/11 was the perfect example. A four-star U.S. general even told the world that the U.S. had and has had plans to invade the Middle East for no apparent reason. There are multiple pieces of evidence in the form of documentation and witness testimony from within that lends credibility to the assertion. If the U.S., or the powers that be which control the U.S. and its allies are creating conflicts, such as 9/11, as well as creating, sponsoring and supporting terrorists or the Islamic State, in order to justify the invasion of other countries, what does that say about U.S. politics? Is this a take over the world type of agenda? It sure seems that way and it's been running for decades. What does that say about how much we can really believe? What does that say about certain decisions, like this recent one by the president? There are always corporate and political interests at stake when it comes to policy moves in the Middle East, as well as religious ones. Perhaps it is another move to create more conflict? Who knows? Again, are we in for even more conflict now? And who is benefiting from this? It can be so hard to tell what's going on in the world today for the average person. Those who constantly read newspapers and watch mainstream media seem to be bombarded with an onslaught of fake news. This is why, I believe, alternative media sites garnered the attention of hundreds of millions of people before they themselves were labeled by mainstream media as fake news. Mr. Trump's decision, a high-risk foray into the thicket of the Middle East, was driven not by diplomatic calculations but by a campaign promise. He appealed to evangelicals and ardently pro-Israel American Jews in 2016 by vowing to move the embassy, and advisors said on Tuesday he was determined to make good on his word. But the president, faced with a deadline of this past Monday to make that decision, still plans to sign a national security waiver to keep the embassy in Tel Aviv for an additional 6 months, even as he set in motion a plan to move it to Jerusalem. Officials said the process would take several years. The religion part. NPR shared that, while President Trump recognized that the status of Jerusalem is a highly sensitive issue, he does not think it will be resolved by ignoring the simple truth that Jerusalem is home to Israel's legislature, its Supreme Court, the Prime Minister, and is such the capital of Israel. If this process does move forward, the U.S. will actually be the first country to move its embassy to Jerusalem, which is claimed by both Palestinians and Israelis. This is obviously a deep issue that requires deep discussion and delving into history and the politics behind the creation of Israel. Another important idea to mention here is that governments do not represent their people these days. America is a great example. We don't seem to live in a democracy but rather reside in the illusion of it. Governments and the corporations that run them may push separation and add fuel to conflict by using religion. But if you ask most people on the ground, many will share the desire for everybody to just get along, and drop all the bull sh. When we go back up the political government level, it's important to acknowledge that the Western military alliance, which includes the United States and Israel, has completely decimated the Middle East under false pretense. We are dealing with a criminal undertaking at a global level, and there is an ongoing war. It is led by the United States. It may be carried out by a number of proxy countries, which are obeying orders from Washington. The global war on terrorism is a U.S. undertaking, which is fake. It's based on fake premises. It tells us that somehow America and the Western world are going after a fictitious enemy, the Islamic State, when in fact the Islamic State is fully supported and financed by the Western military alliance and America's allies in the Persian Gulf. Dr. Michel Chossudovsky. This is why it's not hard to see why exactly the Palestinians, and many others, have been the subject of so much suffering, not that those in Israel haven't either. They even tried to take Israeli officials to the International Criminal Court, ICC, but were denied by President Trump under a threat to shut down the PLO Washington office. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas was summoned to Riyadh to be told in no uncertain terms that he either accepts the peace deal being formulated by the Trump administration or resigns. According to several media reports, the U.S. president is likely to issue what might be called the Trump Declaration, that the U.S. recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. There is only one other state that considers it to be that, Israel. According to Mint Press News. In doing so, Trump will hand the city, wholly to the three monolithic religions, over to an extremist, settler colonialist state to call it its capital, in defiance of international law and the international consensus on its status. The takeover of the Middle East. The U.S. has completely taken over the Middle East, and religion has been used to justify it. It's difficult not to ponder the idea that this recent move by the United States is to simply create even more conflict so rich business people can profit and the deep state can continue pushing towards their new world order. At the end of the day, most people on the planet do not really resonate with the current human experience, and that's obvious. Our planet, although many beautiful aspects about it are clear and abundant, there is no denying the fact that it's drenched in conflict and suffering, which is completely unnecessary. Our lack of ability to see behind the curtain that blinds the masses allows us to be had on so many different levels, and has created a world where the global elite can simply do what they want, and make anything up to justify it. This is why awareness is so important, and why it's important to not believe everything we hear from mainstream media. Across the pond, there's a completely different perspective, and around the world, the perspective of the people always seems to differ from the perspective we hear on TV from our politicians or those whom we deem our leaders. Those who are truly students of ancient knowledge, spirituality and religion would never take part in any type of violence or hatred towards another. In doing so, they would contradict their own religion. Another issue is the fact that a lot of ancient knowledge remains concealed or undiscovered. A large portion of religion is man-made and has also been used to create conflict, turmoil, separation, and to put money into the topics of some very powerful people. Something to think about. It's really time to move on from these types of issues, but it can be difficult because mainstream media seems to enjoy perpetuating it.
This has been the Trump Breaking News Network. Please subscribe and share to stay up to date on the latest news about our president. Be informed.